The Falcons are actually a very dangerous opponent. There's nothing get right about Sunday's game. All you got to do, if you still don't understand what the NFL is as a week-to-week league, is just look at the first 3 weeks of the season. The teams that played horribly in week one bounced back with unbelievable efforts and near wins in week two. The Giants couldn't score. They looked terrible against Washington, and they put up 500 yards and 37 points in a thrilling overtime loss against the Cowboys, covered the point spread. The Dolphins, who couldn't score against the Colts, and we thought, well, they're terrible. They bounced back in a thrilling game that they ended up losing, but they played very well in the following week against the Patriots. By the way, that Dolphins effort against the Bills last Thursday night was there. Just 2 weeks following, well, the Dolphins are the worst team in the league. Look, they may end up being that. But early in the season, week to week, how about week two? 41-17. The Ravens over the Browns. Week three, and the Packers beat up on Washington on Thursday Night Football. Week three, the Browns beat the Packers outright as the biggest or one of the biggest underdogs on the board. Yeah, no, the worst beating in week three was Atlanta's beating against Carolina. That makes Atlanta the absolute play this weekend, regardless of who they're playing. You play them. By the way, the line has dropped. The point spread has gone from Washington -2.5 to Washington -1 or -1.5. Why has it done that? Two reasons. Has nothing to do with Terry, and we will get to Terry here in a moment. It is probably a hedge that Jaden is not going to play against Atlanta. And number two is there's probably a lot of sharp money guessing that Atlanta will be the team this week that looked terrible last week that bounces back and plays well this week. See, the teams in the NFL, they're close. Talent-wise, they are close. This isn't college football where teams are overmatched. Nobody typically is overmatched. They might be, slightly better talent-wise or deeper, in terms of their roster. Certainly coaching plays into all of this. Timing of the game plays into all of this. We saw that last weekend, certainly with the Raiders. Short rest, west to east coast. All of that was in play for last week. Atlanta is the most dangerous team on the board Sunday. And the reason being is they actually do have talent. They have probably one of the best running back, if not the best running back tandems in the league in Bijan Robinson and Tyler Algier. If the Lions with Montgomery and Gibbs don't have that, they have a very good offensive line. They've got a revamped defense. Their issue, of course, is at quarterback, where they're going to be starting Michael Penix Jr. For the 7th or 8th time in his career. Second time against Washington. But they're at home. And they have a terrible, terrible taste in their mouth after last week. There is nothing get right about this game Sunday in Atlanta at all. There's nothing that should, dictate from a team standpoint, fan standpoint, whatever. We can have these conversations. But I doubt that Dan Quinn or Adam Peters or anybody actually believes Atlanta is, basically a sitting duck. Like we can beat them without our best. No, you can't. You may not be able to beat them with your best. And they're down multiple players. No, Corey, there's nothing get right about this week. It's the wrong definition anyway for this particular game. And the Falcons are not terrible. This league each year is made up of, and it's hard to identify the teams in these three categories right now. But there are, a handful, somewhere between 2 and sometimes 4 or 5 teams that by the midpoint of the season, you're like, as long as they don't have a lot of injuries, they got a shot. And then there are 2 or 3 truly terrible teams. You figure those out by about the midpoint of the season. And everybody else, the other 25 or so teams, are basically the same. And it comes down to conditions. It comes down to health. It comes down to circumstance. It comes down to luck a lot of the time in terms of who ends up on top in that particular week. Right now, my guess is that our team is in that big group of 25 teams. Now, when you get to the halfway mark, you can take those 25 teams and say, yeah, if this team stays healthy because they've got the quarterback, and that's where we'll play in those, in that end of the pool for the next many years. Because even when our team isn't in the elite group, they'll be in the middle group, but they may be towards the top of that group because of the quarterback, where as long as he's there, they got a chance to kind of emerge out of that group or give the 3 or 4 teams in the top tier a real game when we get to the postseason. Because remember, if your top tier is even 3 or 4 or 5 teams, that still leaves another 9 that end up making the playoffs from that next group. But we don't know how those groups shake out. I would guess right now the top tier is going to be Buffalo, certainly record-wise. If the Bills stay healthy, they're 3-0 already, and their schedule, on paper, is not that tough. They have the Chiefs on the schedule. I mean, here are their next 4 games. All right, these are the Bills' next 4 games. The Saints, the Patriots, the Falcons, and the Panthers. Then they get the Chiefs at home. And then, again, none of these games are gimmies. None of them are week to week. But the Bills would be the one team, and I think for me, the only team right now, because of the way they are constructed, because of their quarterback, because of their home field advantage, because of what their schedule looks like right now. Again, matters who you play, not so much who you play, but when you play them. Buffalo should end up with, if not the best record, one of the 3 best records in the NFL, which means they're in right now. After that, I don't know if we can say that for sure about Philly. Philly's defense hasn't looked like last year's defense. Not yet. It's capable, certainly capable. Boy, they get an interesting game this week against the Buccaneers. Last year, they went to Tampa in week 4 without Devontae Smith and without A.J. Brown and without 1 or 2 of their offensive linemen. And they got run out of the building. And people looked at it in week 4 last year and said, oh, my God, the Eagles aren't very good. They were 2-2 at that point. They had lost a Monday night game to you-know-who in the Falcons in an incredible kind of fourth quarter game-winning drive. He never has any of those. And then they went to Tampa completely injured, and they got blown out. Well, this week, week 4, same place, Tampa, but Tampa's the injured team. No Mike Evans. 2 3-0 teams. And the Eagles are, sitting there. It's like it's not about who you play. It's about when you play them. And they may be getting Tampa at the perfect time. But back to our team, regardless of who's playing quarterback Sunday, this is going to be a very difficult team because you are going to get the Falcons' absolute best. And by the way, they've already proven that their absolute best isn't that bad. They absolutely annihilated the Vikings, who just annihilated the Bengals. And you can say, well, yeah, the Bengals had Jake Browning at quarterback. Well, the Falcons that night had Michael Penix Jr. in his 5th or 6th start of his career. The Falcons defensively are talented this year, much more so than they were a year ago. Sunday is going to be an absolute one of those very difficult games to win. And if they get out of there with a win, that is like stealing one at this point because the setup is more for Atlanta